The Thomas Crown Affair. In 1968, MGM unveiled one of the decade's sleekest heist films, The Thomas Crown Affair. Directed by Norman Jewison and starring Steve McQueen and Faye Dunaway, it reshaped the caper genre with slick editing, a cool, detached mood, and a protagonist driven purely by the rush of stealing. McQueen's Thomas Crown wasn't just a thief, he was a chess-playing magnate with too much wealth and not enough risk. Dunaway's Vicki Anderson, an insurance investigator armed with a keen intellect and even sharper instincts, matched him at every turn. Their iconic chess scene, charged with tension and flirtation, became an instant touchstone. The ending offered no easy resolution. Did Crown reform, or was he plotting his next move? The film grossed over $14 million in US box office rentals, a respectable figure for the period, and even captured an Oscar for Best Original Song. Yet, no direct successor emerged. Others hypothesized that McQueen's aversion to sequels stood in the way. Biographer Marshall Terrell notes that McQueen sidestepped repeating himself and rejected series prospects, including proposed continuations for Bullet and The Getaway. That mindset may have closed the door before MGM could even knock. Still, the figure of Thomas Crown practically demanded further chapters. Would he evolve into a criminal mastermind or a redeemed thrill-seeker wrestling with temptation? The 1999 remake featuring Pierce Brosnan revived the premise, but bypassed the original's deeper psychological core. For devotees of the 60's version, the lingering question isn't whether Crown escaped, it's why Hollywood never brought him back. The Great Escape. In 1963, United Artists unveiled The Great Escape, a World War II thriller that turned a true prison break into one of cinema's most enduring war sagas. Inspired by the mass breakout from Germany's Stalag Luft III in March of 1944, the film chronicled the bold plan of Allied POWs. 76 fled, with only 3 finding freedom. Though the actual event ended tragically, with 50 recaptured prisoners executed, the movie leaned towards suspense and defiance, highlighting camaraderie and rebellion. Steve McQueen's turn as Hiltz, the rebellious Cooler King, became legendary, most notably the motorcycle chase, which, though fictional and largely performed by stuntman Bud Ekins, solidified McQueen's status. The film raked in impressive box office returns and garnered strong praise, yet no follow-up was ever produced. A few surmised that the absence of surviving characters hindered sequel possibilities. Others attribute it to the shifting social climate of the late 60s, when the Vietnam War made viewers more wary of celebrating conflict. Industry whispers suggest that a spin-off focusing on the escapees who made it out was pitched but abandoned due to studio wariness. Director John Sturges never revisited the narrative, and any franchise ambitions quietly evaporated. Nevertheless, fans still wonder what stories might have risen from the remnants of that barbed wire breakout. The Innocence. In 1961, The Innocence from 20th Century Fox delivered a masterclass in psychological horror that refused to conform to typical genre conventions. Rather than clear-cut explanations, it offered eerie ambiguity, derived from Henry James' The Turn of the Screw, and guided by director Jack Clayton's fascination with moral uncertainty. Deborah Kerr's role as the governess wavering between sanity and hysteria won wide acclaim. Critics like Pauline Kael commended her for a performance showcasing nuance and minimalism, calling it among her most mesmerizing. Cinematographer Freddie Francis used deep focus and stark lighting to cloud the boundary between reality and imagination, techniques that later influenced filmmakers such as Guillermo del Toro. Truman Capote, one of several screenwriters, is frequently credited with enhancing the story's enigma, reportedly under Clayton's guidance. Despite winning artistic praise, the movie fared poorly at American theaters, failing to recover its budget domestically according to Fox's records. That probably ended any talk of sequels. There are claims the studio found no straightforward way to market such an elusive storyline. A second installment could have pursued the governess's psychological spiral or the children's uncanny conduct, strands primed for further exploration. Over the years, whispers have arisen about unproduced scripts and shelved treatments, but it never came to fruition. The Innocence remained singular, a haunting riddle that left its disquieting riddles unsolved, and any prospective sequel lost in eternal shadow. Charade. In 1963, Charade premiered with a genre-blending swirl of suspense, romance, and humor that numerous reviewers dubbed the best Hitchcock film Hitchcock never made. Directed by Stanley Donen and featuring Audrey Hepburn and Cary Grant, The movie delivered an elegant Parisian puzzle filled with stolen wartime funds, hidden motives, and whip-smart dialogue. With a box office haul surpassing $13 million domestically, it wasn't just lauded by critics, it also thrived financially. The on-screen chemistry between Hepburn and Grant crackled, though Grant reportedly requested script tweaks to ease his discomfort over their 25-year age gap. By the time filming concluded, he was inching toward retirement, stepping away from acting in 1966, a decision that likely derailed any early sequel ideas. A handful of cinema scholars suggest that a follow-up might have morphed them into traveling detectives, part North by Northwest, part The Thin Man. But those concepts never took shape. Another twist. A copyright notice snag left Charade in the public domain, complicating rights issues and sowing confusion over potential official sequels. Ownership tangles and profit-sharing pitfalls became a legal quagmire no studio wanted to address. In 2002, Universal attempted a contemporary redo with The Truth About Charlie, but it fizzled, reaffirming that the original's charm is tough to duplicate. No franchise, no further chapters, just a standalone gem that continues to spark what-if musings even now. The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. Released in 1962, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance wasn't the Western fans expected. It was the one they didn't know they needed. John Ford stripped the genre of its hero worship, exposing the uneasy truth behind frontier legends. James Stewart played Ransom Stoddard, a senator celebrated for killing an outlaw he never actually shot. The real gunman? John Wayne's Tom Doniphan, who faded into obscurity while Stoddard's myth built a career. The film ends with a line that still echoes, "When the legend becomes fact, print the legend." That wasn't just a quote. It was a quiet indictment of historical convenience. A sequel could have explored Stoddard's political rise, haunted by a truth buried for public gain, or tracked how Doniphan's sacrifice was erased by progress. But no follow-up ever came. Ford, though not retired immediately, directed only 3 more features before stepping back due to declining health. Stewart and Wayne were both in their early 50s during filming, still bankable but perhaps not ideal for a long-term franchise. And by the late 60s, the Western genre was shifting fast. Revisionist hits like The Wild Bunch and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid marked a turn toward violence, irony, and moral ambiguity. Liberty Valance had already cracked the myth open. Another film might have shattered it entirely. Initial reviews were mixed, and the film only gained recognition decades later. Numerous analysts suspect its ambiguity was too risky to revisit. Others claim that Ford considered a continuation, but abandoned it after clashing with studio executives. Whatever the reason, the legend stayed intact. Unquestioned, unresolved, and quietly explosive. The Lion in Winter. Debuting in 1968, The Lion in Winter unleashed a fraught blend of historical intrigue and verbal fireworks. Peter O'Toole's brooding King Henry II, and Katharine Hepburn's razor-sharp Eleanor of Aquitaine led a script that captured 3 Academy Awards, including Best Actress, Best Adapted Screenplay, and a Best Original Score, out of 7 total nominations. Yet in spite of its critical victory and solid box office, no sequel was ever made. That silence has puzzled film scholars for ages. The film concludes just before history takes a dramatic pivot. Henry's sons, Richard, Geoffrey, and John, are all clamoring for power, and none are trustworthy. The real events that followed were explosive. Richard the Lionheart's crusades, John's calamitous rule, and the gradual disintegration of the Plantagenet line. It's prime material for sequels. Hollywood in the late 1960s wasn't set up for elongated historical sagas. The franchise template was still in its infancy, and studios were pivoting toward more rebellious, youth-centered projects like Easy Rider and 5 Easy Pieces. The prevailing theory is that a sequel was never approved because the original cast was advancing in years, with Hepburn in her 60s and O'Toole nearing middle age. Others argue that the story's theatrical underpinnings originating from James Goldman's stage play were a limiting factor. Dialogue dense and self-contained, the narrative was never built to sprawl. Still, there was a treasure trove of possibilities. A follow-up could have charted Richard's coronation in 1189, his campaigns abroad, or John's eventual signing of the Magna Carta in 1215, watershed moments in the evolution of monarchy and governance. Rumors occasionally surface about renewed interest in continuing the tale, but none ever advanced. The closest the story came to resurrection was a television reinterpretation in 2003. Hardly a sequel, but a fresh angle on old ground. In the end, The Lion in Winter remains a pinnacle of 60s cinema, intellectually fierce, politically cutting, and brimming with sequel-worthy potential. It concluded just before the next wave of conflict, leaving behind a legacy of unanswered questions and missed openings. The Sand Pebbles. The Sand Pebbles transported audiences to the Yangtze River in 1926, but its narrative never ventured beyond one film. Released in 1966 and headlined by Steve McQueen, it fused wartime strain, east-west friction, and private disillusionment into a slow-paced epic. Its resolution, somber, abrupt, and unfulfilled, left open questions about American imperialism, the toll of duty, and the emotional fallout for its surviving figures. A sequel could have investigated the geopolitical repercussions in China, or tracked the mental scars of crew members who returned home. Why no second installment? Rumors point to shifting corporate goals and the growing expense of period dramas by the late 60s. Rumor has it that McQueen's unwillingness to reprise roles and his growing taste for contemporary action fare halted any follow-up conversations. The film's moderate revenue, despite solid reviews and multiple Oscar nods, probably didn't help matters. Still, with its layered historical context and unresolved emotional threads, The Sand Pebbles stands as a prime example of a single-serving narrative that left significant space, maybe even a need, for more. Wait Until Dark. Released in 1967, Wait Until Dark transformed a cramped apartment into a cauldron of tension. Audrey Hepburn portrayed Susan, recently blinded and thrust into a deadly cat-and-mouse chase revolving around a heroin-stuffed doll and 3 ruthless swindlers. The film's claustrophobic set and deft application of darkness solidified its status as a benchmark in thrillers. Critics applauded its gripping pace, and Hepburn secured another Oscar nomination for Best Actress. Alan Arkin's chilling turn as Rote remains a landmark in villain portrayals. Roger Ebert would later deem it among the most chilling performances ever filmed. With its commercial success and rave reviews, a sequel looked like an obvious choice. Various observers have proposed that a continuation might have trailed Susan's recovery, her heightened senses, or a fresh brush with danger, but it never came to pass. Part of that stems from its foundation. Frederick Knott's taut stage play offered no direct avenue for a second chapter. Hepburn, meanwhile, started withdrawing from Hollywood to focus on personal and humanitarian pursuits, accepting only sporadic roles in subsequent years. Without her involvement, studios likely hesitated to recast such a central figure. And in an age before sequels became the norm, even a thriving hit wasn't guaranteed another round. Still, speculation about what might have been continues to ripple through film retrospectives, proof that some shadows refuse to fade. The Night of the Iguana. In 1964, The Night of the Iguana landed with both critical fascination and tabloid buzz. Directed by John Huston and adapted from Tennessee Williams' 1961 play, it starred Richard Burton as a defrocked minister in a downward spiral along Mexico's coast. The film amassed over $12 million, a respectable total for the era, and claimed an Academy Award for Best Costume Design in black and white, alongside 3 additional nominations. Despite its financial success and emotionally stirring finale, no follow-up ever came to be. That's notable, because the ending wasn't so much conclusive as it was a pause. Burton's Reverend Shannon was left in a fragile phase of hope, flanked by characters whose fate seemed unresolved. Ava Gardner's Maxine and Deborah Carr's Hannah Jelka's each hinted at deeper, untapped narrative possibilities. A sequel might have tracked Shannon's search for redemption or chronicled his collapse into further chaos. But the concept of revisiting it ran into a wall, the wall of Tennessee Williams' creative principles. The celebrated playwright was famously averse to follow-ups, reportedly insisting that his dramatic works were self-contained and not open for expansion. Biographers paraphrase him as declaring that once a character's arc was realized on stage or screen, there was no justification for revisiting. Behind the camera, the production was chaotic at best. Shot in Puerto Vallarta, the set devolved into a spectacle when Elizabeth Taylor, who wasn't part of the film, joined Burton during filming. Their notorious extramarital affair, already under intense scrutiny, took over headlines and arguably overshadowed the film itself. Some even claim the off-screen drama mirrored the story's themes of illicit passion and moral decline. Speculation also circles Burton's own hesitation about returning to the role. His work as Shannon earned accolades for its emotional rawness, But some wonder if returning to such a tormented role might have cut too deeply, especially given Burton's widely known battles with alcohol and volatility. In the end, The Night of the Iguana remained a standalone, mood-driven portrait that easily could have anchored a sequel. Its absence perhaps says more about the personal and artistic restrictions of its moment than about a lack of potential. The Collector. Released in 1965, The Collector stunned audiences with its icy precision and psychological weight. Directed by William Wyler and based on John Fowles' novel, the film centered on a socially isolated butterfly enthusiast, played with eerie calm by Terence Stamp, who kidnaps a young woman, Miranda, portrayed by Samantha Eggar in a role that earned her an Academy Award nomination. Critics lauded the film's tension and moral complexity, and Eggar's performance was widely praised for its emotional depth. Stamp, while not Oscar-nominated, received a BAFTA nod, and later admitted the role left a lasting psychological impression on him. Despite the film's acclaim, no sequel followed. One reason? The ending. Miranda dies, closing the door on a continuation of her story. But the concept had legs. A follow-up could have explored the Collector's next victim, or delved deeper into his fractured psyche. Others maintain Columbia Pictures balked at the idea of returning to such grim material, especially as Hollywood was still testing the waters of post-Hays Code storytelling. Others point to Stamp's own shift toward more spiritually driven roles, distancing himself from horror. Whispers from the era even suggest Wyler had no interest in revisiting the darkness. Still, the film's legacy endures. The Collector remains a disturbing one-off, one that might have launched a chilling franchise had the industry been ready to go back into that basement. The Stalking Moon. Released in 1968 by MGM, The Stalking Moon stood out in a genre already showing signs of fatigue. Gregory Peck led the cast as a retired Army scout, with Robert Mulligan, still riding the acclaim of To Kill a Mockingbird, at the helm. What they delivered wasn't a typical Western. It was eerie, restrained, and laced with psychological dread. The antagonist, a silent Apache warrior named Salvaje, never speaks a word, yet his presence looms with near-mythic intensity. Critics, including Roger Ebert, commended the film's slow-burning tension, calling it deliberate and quiet, with an unnerving atmosphere. Despite the pedigree and critical nods, MGM never pursued a sequel. The likely culprit? Box office returns that fell into the dreaded middle ground. Not a disaster, but far from a hit. By the late 1960s, the Western was losing ground to grittier, more urban storytelling, and studios were cautious about backing genre hybrids. Still, the film left major threads dangling. What happened to the boy, born of two cultures and hunted by his own father? Did Peck's character ever reconcile his violent past with the quiet life he sought? Certain critics propose a follow-up might have tracked the boy's journey into adulthood, perhaps even flipping the genre entirely, from Western to psychological drama. Reports have floated for years that Mulligan once toyed with expanding the story, but MGM reportedly passed due to concerns over marketability. Ultimately, The Stalking Moon became a one-and-done, an ambitious outlier that hinted at a richer saga, only to vanish into the cinematic dust. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave a like and comment. Also consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell to get notified of our new videos each week. Thanks for watching.